Hi, in this video I want to discuss purpose versus meaning and the kind of discussions that we have with ourselves when it comes to meaning and purpose and what we find in life and what their kind of meaning can be in life as well as the purpose and the distinctions between those things. Obviously there is a distinction, there's a fine distinction when at least when it comes to the philosophical, the hard philosophy of discussing what life and value and meaning and what matters in the world and so on and so forth. But a lot of these issues come down to semantics. Obviously, meaning. Is there any meaning? Of course, there's meaning and there's value in this world, and that obviously has to come with the that comes par for the course, such as the feelings that we experience. Obviously, they mean something because they're the source of all meaning. Obviously, when you start asking questions of what's meaning inside of meaning, and obviously these issues with what really is and what isn't and what can be explained, these things mean intrinsically in and of themselves. They don't need any other explanation other than themselves to mean something because the meaning is intrinsically innate and bound in these things that exist. It's a synonymous. Meaning and feeling, value are all synonymous with one thing. And the difference between meaning and purpose, I would say, is purpose is what can we do with these things? What can we do within the boundaries of this life that allows us to have this meaning? And what can we do other than feel this meaning? Obviously, the purpose we can decide to run down and break down the word and make it seem like it's something much more simplistic, or actually, based on circumstance. Like the purpose of this is for me to do this based on circumstance, like I mentioned. But there's no real grandiose purpose in this existence other than leading behind another curtain that we're trying to find. The difference between meaning and purpose is the meaning is describing something that has intrinsic meaning, such as value, something that's undeniable, and it also has to do a lot with the zero-sum game element of this existence. Obviously, we have feelings and meanings, and all these feelings mean something, but they mean only certain degrees of deprivation. We only go through so much meaning, but the purpose is we're only there is no purpose. If you want to describe it, I guess supposedly more accurately, there is no real purpose. There's only a purpose to fight and try to maintain as best of a meaning as you can. There's no intrinsic purpose in this existence other than to maintain this process of um, continuation, such as living this life, to survive for the sake of survival, to move on and move so on and so forth. There's no intrinsic purpose beyond that, but the meaning is more in the value and the experience that we have based on these feelings and sensations that allow us, the senses that allow us to feel. And the purpose is more just to maintain that function, but there's no real purpose that we at least expect based on the grandiose expectations that we have for this life and existence. There's nothing more or really less than that. But you can tie purpose to different things, such as a purpose for this. The purpose I'm doing this for the reason, obviously, reason and purpose is the reason I'm doing this is for the purpose of doing this or accomplishing this goal. But the real purpose intrinsically in this a mechanism of life and living life, there's no intrinsic purpose. There's only intrinsic mechanism of value, which we can feel and be victims of or be receivers of. And there's nothing else more to that sense. So those distinctions are really come down to really semantics, and those things are very there can be a fine line, but obviously even within the definitions of the word that you can use and how you can use it, but it really does come down to semantics and things like that. But it's not a thing that should be really worrying consideration when it comes to that kind of idea. But there is a distinction, at least between making the distinction between meaning and purpose, at least when it comes to the philosophical terms that we're discussing and the way that we're discussing it. But yes, um, the meaning is a little more intrinsic as opposed to purpose, which is a little more just defining the mechanism for what it is. We're more like an ethereal feeling. The value comes from something that you can't necessarily touch, but you are is a product of being, say, a touch or sensation. And the purpose is more describing the hard reality. Is there a real purpose to this? Obviously, based on cause and effect, there's a purpose based on certain circumstances, sort of like breaking it down, cause and effect, and so on and so forth. But there's not really any intrinsic purpose when it comes to anything more than that. It's really a basic function that's deciding to move on based on its own set of non-rules based on nothing but the function that is existing based on these crude forces moving us in a certain direction. But is there any real intrinsic purpose? Only the purpose that is being forced through by the mechanism of the forces that control us, but there's no real intrinsic intelligent purpose that we're doing anything beyond that. And if so, there would only be a brick wall in our way, realizing that there is nothing on the other side. It's just a brick wall with more bricks behind it. There's nothing more except taking one brick down to see another brick, and you just have to work to get that one brick down to see the one brick behind it. And you just realize after a while that you're only going to be seeing bricks, putting your effort into taking these bricks off just to see another brick, and there's not going to be anything more to it. That's almost what we do. We keep expecting something, like there's some grandiose, but we expect that the next brick's going to be grandiose, just the same way as the previous one, but there's not going to be any real grandiosity. It's just going to be the same thing, the same repetitive mechanism. But you're just going to keep putting an expectation that the next brick's going to be super brick, and that's going to have some kind of a power up in it, and you can look at it and you could make something out of it, or you can look at some kind of super force or whatever it is, some kind of great expectation or like some kind of conclusion. If there's a conclusion, then that means that the brick doesn't matter if there's a brick or not a brick, because that's a conclusion. It's either reaching an end or not reaching an end. If you're not reaching an end, you expect to keep pulling bricks. That's one solution. That's the one way out. Or there's another way where you just pull it and there's not another brick left. So there's either going to be another brick behind it, or there's not going to be any bricks behind it. There's no great special fourth dimension where there isn't something but is something at the same time. There's either a no brick or one brick, or a brick. And you're just putting the effort just to keep pulling it out if there are continuing to be bricks that you keep pulling out. It's either no brick or there are bricks. So you're just going to keep on putting that effort and an expectation and just to keep following through. Is there going to be something new? And that's not necessarily going to be the case. You're just going to keep falling for the same mechanism. Is there going to be brick? No, 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 no. You keep finding a brick, or you're going to eventually find nothing. You're just going to keep finding bricks or nothing. I think eventually you're just going to find nothing in the end, because eventually that's what really the logic concludes us to deem so, because that's really what it is. There's only so much that can fit in this world. But yes, based philosophically, obviously we're talking about almost a religious grandiosity of an expectation of purpose, but there's only so much we can expect in a purpose of existence. The purpose can only go so far, and the purpose is nothing like you think it is. It's only a function. There's only a function, not a purpose. And then you could describe synonymously with what we're talking about here is the function is the purpose, or the purpose is the function, interchangeably, but necessarily semantically and whatever the meaning. It's all just really kind of silly semantic games. There's nothing really you're doing beyond that, but there is a purpose, and the purpose is just to maintain its repetitive function. But at that point, you just wonder if there's a purpose. Is there any grand purpose that can't be explained? Obviously, if it can't be explained, then it's another thing. It's not a real purpose. It's just another function of the biology or moving with the forces. There's nothing secretive here. There's nothing special that you're going to find. There's no sparkly rainbow that's going to blind you with its flashing light. And there's not going to be any of that unexplainable glory or whatever it may be. These emotions that we tie to something that can't be understood. None of this stuff is going to be too. None of this stuff is going to surprise us, and it's already been explained thoroughly. So the expectation that we have for this stuff is completely and utterly misplaced and misunderstood. So there's no real purpose in this existence except for the function of repetitive. And once you start repeating the function just starts caving in on itself. Meaning the logic of it is that if it just keeps repeating itself, it's sort of like people pulling the bricks. There's no real function except pulling the brick out, or functioning for the sake of functioning just to continue on. That's not a real purpose. That's just function, continuing on its cycle. There's no real purpose, but you can call it a purpose. But that's the only purpose there is if you want to call it a purpose. So that's all there is, really. So there's no real function or purpose here. There's nothing grandiose on the other side. You can keep thinking that, but there's no proof or any reason to believe so, because it hasn't been proven so far. And based on the function that we already know and the stuff we already know, there's no reason to believe otherwise. So other than that, I don't think there's any reason to believe those things. Meaning, obviously, there's meaning inside the non-purpose of existence, but the purpose is only a zero sum of experiencing the negatives and repeatedly feeling these things just to be addicts of this function and just to continue the same function over and over again. I feel, but I'm only going to feel so I can feel pain, so I can avoid a greater negative or whatever it may be. So there's only feeling more. There's a function in the feeling, or the sensation of the meaning. The meaning is the feeling, and there's no function or reason to have this meaning to begin with, except for there's a function of biology that allowed this meaning to exist. So there's no reason that we should have to feel. But if we do, and that we want to tie the purpose to the meaning, then there's no real reason to apply those connections. But if you have to, you can say that we're working within the function or the purpose within the meaning, because there's only so much we can do except these repetitive functions that we keep doing. There's feeding on the same addictions, the same function we keep eating to eat more. The meaning and the sensations we feel from the function of existence is we're working off the function or the purpose, the non-purpose, the function or the non-purpose, which is a purpose and the vague sense like I've been mentioning, and you're applying that to a meaning, and the meaning is you can apply that semi-function or that semi-purpose to the meaning, and you can apply that, and it can be, we're just abiding by the purpose, the pointless purpose, and we're abiding by the pointless purpose. The meaning is abiding by the pointless purpose that we have, other than just repeat itself over and over again, keep feeding ourselves, keep pulling the brakes out to see another brick, keep eating to get full only to get hungry again, and there's no real reason. It's just a cyclical cycle that keeps going around in circles. So there's no real meaning to this existence, except that it happened to be functionally possible in the possibility of the existence that we're living in, and that's exactly what happened. So there's no real reason to believe anything special is going to happen, and there's no proof of it, and this is the only purpose that we can obviously see based on all the clues that we give, because all those clues are based on facts that we can see in the environment as opposed to nonsense that can't be proven with anything but itself. So obviously this is the proof in the environment that we're proving. The world's not a Bible. The Bible is the Bible, and the world is more than the Bible, but the Bible is only the Bible to the Bible. So we're working within a greater scale than such something like a work of fiction that we apply things to and only having proof of itself. There's not the same thing. It's not equatable. There's no reason to equate those things because they're impossible to equate as well. This idea of purpose mostly comes from the idea of religion and the idea that there's something more, but in reality, when you didn't really think about that before, you just sort of functioned through existence, lived your life through, and maybe imagined a few things based on the crude mechanism that's controlling your mind, but other than that, there's no real reason to believe anything special is going to happen. So any of this stuff doesn't make any sense, but there's no real reason to believe that there's going to be something special when you die or you do this. There's no function to live in heaven, to continue living in heaven, to do nothing except do what? Nothing. Exactly. You're going to live to do nothing. But at this point, you just start asking, is there a real function or purpose here? There's meaning in a world that has no purpose, pointless purpose, or like crude mechanism controlled by a crude but valuable mechanism controlled by crude forces. So those things can equate as well. So a lot of these things can be tied together, and it almost becomes one big ball of a synonymous ball of all these things that can be related to back to this one basic idea. So all these ideas being controlled, these valuable sources being controlled by crude forces, and so on and so forth. So obviously this is something that I've heard brought up a few times, like in Mendham and so on and so forth, people bringing this subject up and making distinctions. And obviously this is a distinction I've made good enough in the past, so I just want to make sure I make it clear. I've been wording things, and obviously that's what at this point I'm doing, is just rewording things and make sure it's understood and it can't be misconstrued, because obviously that's all people are looking to do. Even if they understand what they're doing or not understand what they're doing, we have to make sure people can misconstrue the truth as much as they want. It doesn't mean that they're right. It's just a matter of them trying to fight what's the truth, and using the fact that they can be just as easily credible as you are, and using that as an excuse, and that's not the case. We're just saying the truth is the truth. It doesn't matter how much you want to say you're the truth, or you're saying the truth or spouting the truth. If you're not, you're not. It doesn't matter if you say you're right or I'm saying I'm right. If I'm right, I'm right. You're wrong. It doesn't matter. The truth is on my side. But regardless of that, there's nothing really else to discuss on this subject. Purpose and meaning, slight distinctions just to make understood that we're living with the meaning is functioning on the pointless purpose that we have, or the non-purpose, or the meaning is based on the function, being working on the function, but there's nothing really more or less that's working at this fundamental level that we're existing on. So there's nothing really else that we're really working with here. So yeah, I think I've explained it enough. So anyway, if I have anything else to mention until next time, hope I made enough sense, hope I didn't ramble too much. So thank you, until next time, another video, bye.